Hello, welcome to Pro Modeler. Very special build for this one. What we're going to do with this one is totally overhaul and detail the Tamiya 1/32 scale Phantom. Now for this one we're going to go really to town as well. We're going to be using the Aries detail cockpit. It's a lovely resin cockpit. We'll talk about these parts in a moment. But the difference with this one, what we're going to do, we're also going to use the full colour photo etch set that comes by Edard, and then placing it on it. The other thing also we're going to do, we're actually going to use fibre optics for lighting up all the dials, the instruments, everything else like that inside the cockpit area. The other things we're going to do to it, we're going to fit seamless suckers to it, which obviously a very nice touch because you can see the engine through from the inside and everything else like that with no joints. But also what we're going to do is drop the engine slightly out of the bay. Okay. Other things we're also going to be doing is we're going to pull the spine off completely off of the back of the Phantom, and going to show all the pipe work and the detailed areas and everything else like that. We're going to take some of the panels off of the side and everything, so it looks like it's sort of in deep maintenance type of sort of scenario with it. So hopefully what we're going to do is bring this completely to life in a different way that you haven't seen before. Okay, so as you can imagine, doing something like a 1/32 scale kit, it's a big old kit and everything else like that. We'll talk about what we're going to do to the aircraft in a moment, so we'll just clear this one out of the way. But this is some of the parts we're going to be using. So okay, if you're going to take on a job like this, you're going to need good reference material. Now obviously there's different types of formats of reference material out there. There's obviously some just the normal type of books you look at, but what you need is something that really gets underneath the skin, and something that does that very well is Danny Gorman's Undercovering the F4 Phantom range. Now in here you'll sort of get your normal type of books, as you can imagine, okay, that you sort of see everywhere, that does your cockpits and everything else. But where this one really goes beyond it is some of the lengths of the details. Obviously you can see some of the engines here. I get the glare off, you can see the engines, but what we're looking at is further on we've got some absolutely fantastic shots of a Phantom that's in deep maintenance. You just find them. So obviously we've got your sort of standard cockpits and various things, which obviously we'll be using a lot. But here we go, this is them in deep maintenance. So we've got things like you don't normally see, like up here we've got the APU, or the emergency power unit, sort of opened up and showing nicely. And this is the important bit, this is the spine work, which we're hoping to recreate, is all of this type of stuff. So having references like this is absolutely great. And obviously opening up panels, you can see how the skin actually underneath affects it. These are the ones on the wings you're actually looking at if you haven't realised. So things like that really bring this all sort of into life. So if you're going to do something like we're going to plan on doing now, it really helps to have a good reference source. So there you go, you can't go wrong with that. It's an investment, but well worth every penny of that investment. The other things we're going to be using a lot of is obviously things like lead wire. We've got Model Plus one here from 0.2mm, which is like hair, right the way up to sort of 1mm, which gives good hosing and bits and pieces like that. So that's really handy stuff, because obviously doing stuff like that, pipe work, we're going to need a lot of that. Okay, so we've got lots of that. This is two sort of flavours really with this. This is what we call structural plastic tubing, or plasticard evergreen make it. We've got plastic strut, which is this one. The nice thing about this one is, however, this one has actually got a metal core in it. So actually what you can do, you can go along and just get it, bend it, and it holds its shape, and then bend it the other way. So if you're doing what we're planning on doing, these fuel lines and things like that, this is great stuff, because if it's normal sort of plastic, you have to bend it. If it's lead wire, it tends to move around a bit. This way we can make it up pre-done and just slot them in and everything we need. So we're going to be using a lot of that. So we've got it in various thicknesses as we go through, and then we've got our normal sort of very thin, this is piping as well for doing things like that, which is just a little bit of a crossover between the two. So that's those done there. We said about it before, but we've got the photo etch sheet here, which is going to sort of complement the cockpit. These black ones you can see at the back, obviously we're not going to need much of those at all, because we're going to have fibre optics coming through, and you're going to see with the crossover. But certainly this front one up here we'll be using, and then obviously for the Rio as well, we've got the Rio's one over here, you can see. So things like that. But obviously the other thing it does come with, which is very nice, is all these other little things like the photo etch mirrors, the side, everything for sort of detailing up. So anywhere where the resin cockpit doesn't go with, or sort of fall short, we can replace with photo etch from that one, and so on, everything else. Seamless suckers, great idea. If you're not very good at doing seam lines inside air intakes and things like that. You might have seen I do a couple of tricks with plasticard and with liquid putty to get rid of it. But if you're not very good at it, this is a great thing, because these are literally drop-in replacements for the original, and obviously they're very nicely smoothed out and everything else like that already. So it's all done for you. All you have to do is replace the kit part with these. Quite hard to get a hold of at the moment, but hopefully they'll be sort of mainstream again and filtering their way through, just like that. Last thing we really need to talk about, which will be these parts. These are the Aries exhausts. I've used these many times before, so that's why I haven't got them out already, but I can just show you what you'll get in your box. So in the box you'll actually get, just flipping this out. Wow, we've got different colour ones for a change. Okay, you'll actually get, if you've ever used the 148s, the 132nds are just the same. Okay, so we've got these end nozzles. They're again beautifully detailed, a lot more detailed than you actually get with a kit part and everything else. And again, seamless and joinless because you haven't got to put any parts on. And obviously we've just got one here. It's exactly the same, it's just in a different coloured resin. Instead of using the grey resin, this one comes in the actual sort of raw resin colour. And then obviously you've got part of the engine and the little fan blades, which you're going to get up there as well. So they show you all the details on, and obviously what happens is you cut this rear area off here, and this one will just fit on the end, and you can use them like that. What we're going to do that's slightly different is we're going to extend the engine, this tube section, a bit longer, detail it up, and we're going to drop it out at the bottom of the aircraft just slightly, so it looks like it's being removed. So it will open up all the panels underneath, they'll all be opened up and showing them through. So that's the plan of attack of how we're going to do it all. Obviously there's lots more details which we'll cover as we go right the way through the build. So let's get on with it. Okay, so the first thing we're looking at is obviously this is the fuselage main section. It comes as one piece, and really what we're going to do to it. Now, as explained earlier, we're going to cut the spine off to make way for the refueling sort of area and hydraulic lines and everything else, all the electric bits pieces that run across the spine. And then obviously what I've done is I've marked them out. Now this is one of those things where, you know, we've all done it. I've done it many times before. You mark it out, or you think, oh, I know where it is, and you just chop away at it. Before you know it, you've cut it in the wrong place. Perhaps not what you wanted at all. So all of a sudden you're like, ow, right, okay, now I need to sort that out and all the rest of it. The other thing as well, what we want to do is obviously we're going to have to build up framework along this top and everything else. What I would advise doing, where you've got panel lines that actually show, perhaps like running down here, is to actually continue it on with your pen so you can actually see where you've actually got them going over, because some of them, like this area's here, the panel line doesn't continue further down, it stops, but it will give me a reference, so I know there's a panel line going to run across and some ribbing and framework we've all got to make up. But it'll just keep me, I know I can just look at the original part, but it just keeps my mind a little bit more active to say, look, you know, there's panelling to go in here right the way across. Now you might notice we've done this area around the tail as well, because that's how it is. I've checked the references and we're okay with that. Certainly down here, this is where we're going to build the APU, sorry, the emergency power unit. The airflow one, okay, and this is where we're going to take the one off the side. Now I'm not going to take off further up, originally was, but I think it's going to interfere slightly with the actual air intakes as they go through. Obviously I'll have to make it quite thin and everything else. So what we'll do, we'll open up this one for the moment, and then we'll see about opening up this one below it, maybe because it sort of comes along with the gear and everything else, and you might be able to see down through it. There again, we'll just have a look-see. Same is going to go roughly on the other side, you can see. Down the back here, we've got this one, we're going to open up that little panel as well, because it seems to be open a lot of the time. Down the front, that's where it gets slightly interesting. What you've actually got here, this is the resin cockpit for this one. Fantastically detailed and everything else. But obviously, when you come to put it in, you're going to have to take out the original parts, because this one will come in and fit underneath, but you've got the original parts that are going to be in the way, so they've got to come out. There again, I've looked, I've checked, I'm happy with how it is, so now we can get ahead and cut out. So say you've got a couple of options on this. Mr. Big Saw and just get in there and hack them out, which, you know, isn't so bad in something like this. You can literally just come in like this, line up, happy with how it all is. start merrily chopping away. You know, normally just take your time with all these. These are big things you're doing now. The thing is, you have to remember these kits are an investment at over £100 each now. They, with all these aftermarket bits and all the goodies that go on this, we're nearing £200 worth of gear going on this particular aircraft. So just take your time with it, enjoy the build, and just, you know, if things start to wobble and going wrong, don't worry about it. You can always put them right. Okay, so we've got this little one at the rear, which is quite fiddly to get into. So what I'm going to do is score it first. Let's get in there, and you can, by doing that, all that's doing is giving me a, you know, a get out of jail free card, because if it starts to bend, hopefully it will bend along that little fracture point we've put in here. And then what you can do, you can either drill it, you know, literally come along with a little pin just in like this. We just show you a couple. Okay, you can just literally come along with a few of these, and what it'll do, it'll weaken it sufficiently so that you can get in there afterwards and cut it out, and then just sand and tidy it up. Just this way, it's the nice safe way, because what you don't want to do is obviously bend plastic and all things like that. Because if we start bending things, we're going to start to bend things out of shape. So just pop these across. Okay, so I'm doing this, we're saying about the, we're wiring this one up for electrics. So what we're going to be doing is, for this one, we're going to be using LED lights with fibre optic cables attached, so they're going to come through, illuminate the cockpit. So hopefully they'll illuminate all the dials very nicely, and then once they've illuminated the dials like that, the leftover parts we can use for other little bits, which I'll show you a little bit after. So okay, we drilled all the way through, so now you should just be able to get in here and ping it out the way. Okay, so you're left with a bit of an edge in there, so you can get in there, clean up with a knife if you need to, or you can pop in here with your mini drill. Just to clean them out as is required. And then what you'll notice now is hopefully the main cockpit area will fit in here. Something like this, and this will give us the actual how the cockpit is going to look actually on the build and in there fitted up. So what we do, we get all these parts cleaned up. These areas at the back with these spine ones, we're just going to take our time and just remove each one as we go round very gently. Obviously, because we're cutting into this, we're going to lose a certain amount of rigidity in the body, which I'm aware of. So if it looks like it's getting a little bit weak, what we're going to have to end up doing is re-strengthening in. But I'm hoping, because it's got strengthening in here anyway, it'll be enough to take the weight. And as soon as we've got those all cut out, we can have a look and we start making up templates for actually all the panels we're going to have to replace. Okay, so after a little bit of digging, as I say, we've gone through these, so we should be able to just push these through now and open these up. What we can do, we can thin these that we've taken off, and we'll use those as panels to go back in, so they should be able to go back on as a loose fit onto them as well. Now the tricky one, to be honest, is this spine. So all I did was basically run the blade down until it comes off, and we've got it off in one bit. Now the thing is, you immediately think is like, oh my god, look, we've got these points underneath, it's going to need to screw to it and everything else. Well, luckily for us, the two that we're using, which are these 2 points in here, this one's for the engines. Well, we're dropping an engine, so we don't need that one. Okay, and the one at the front is for the intakes, and we've got the seamless ones which don't hook onto those either. So we're okay with that point. So that's that one out the way now. So what we can do is clean this up nicely. Got a couple of little bits of plastic going on there. I was a bit worried about, as I said, the rigidity of it all. It was going to come apart and everything else, and actually it's still very good, because obviously we've got a curve down in here. It's very thick plastic, to be honest. It takes a long time to cut through it. It's over 1 millimetre thick. But once you're through, it's easy done. So just take your time with it and opening up those panels. So what I've got to do, I've still got to open up another one. I've got one at the back and a few bits and pieces, and this one up here. But once we've got that open, but what we can actually do now is start to look at what we're going to need. Now I've got some plastic strip here, some styrene sheet. very handy to have. And what we can do is use these as templates for the sizes we're actually going to need, because we know we're going to need obviously the size of what this is. So what we can do, we can just do it roughly for the moment. Okay, we can just place this up like this. Okay, and then we can use that marker again. Okay, we can just go along and say, right, okay, so we need it there. Okay, it gets thinner at this end to here. It's that long. And what we can actually do is cut this out now, as is needed, and build up a little box for this bottom area as it goes in. Because obviously what we're going to do is replace this underside part with a bit of plastic card underneath it, just like that. So what we can do is just quickly, I'll cut this out like this, okay, and also we're going to do ones for the inside here to make back boxes, and then we can go about how it's going to fit and putting the bars in and all the detail bits. Okay, so what we've got now is the plate. Now this is quite thick. This is basically, I think it's about 1mm plastic card, so it's got a bit of thick, but if you wanted to, you could laminate two together to make it even thicker if you need the rigidity to go back in here we were talking about before. So okay, what have we done? As I said, we measured it up, you saw it on the template, okay, and we've put a little X in the back. This is purely to give us our X going on back here as well. So we've got the two lined up, because then it will be strength on this post as well and everything in. We've taken a couple of little nicks, you can probably see out of here, onto these, okay, and then just to test fit, we'll just pop it in, and then hopefully it should just lay down in there. And then what it does, it gives us our entire spine base back in there. Okay, now this is where you can take your choice. Obviously we need to pack in the ends, which we can obviously do with shims of plastic card to place in there, and then just trim them up as is needed all around there. Now as I said, it depends if you want to actually glue that into position now and work on it from the top, or if you want to do it as a separate and put them in afterwards. For the moment I'm going to do it separate, so what I'm going to do now is just box in these areas here, because then we can put holes through for the lines to go through and everything else, and pack out these other ones, and then we can start making the formers, which are going to make the crossover parts going over them. The other thing we can do as well, we might as well cut off these pins here because they're no good to us anymore, and then what we want to do is just sand out and sort of thin out slightly this area. So you can either use it as a separate by chopping them up into the individual panels and perhaps having them laying around, or you can have it as a one piece and then just reveal it afterwards just by uncovering it if you wanted to in one lump, just like that. But obviously because we've got the formers going to go in, it's going to then, obviously they're going to carry on for these little marks we put here. It'll carry them over. It might interfere with this top part, so it's personal choice if you really want to fiddle around with it enough to make it all fit back together, or perhaps if you're just going to have it displayed separately, you can cut a few of these up into separate panels and just have them lying around afterwards. So it's a total choice on that one. But that's that panel done, and to show putting that back one in, we're going to do the same down here. So basically all it's going to be is another piece of plastic card that's going to come through on the back, okay, and we'll box it out. Just going to sink it in, not very much. Looking at the reference photos, obviously I don't have any drawing, so I am doing a little bit of guesstimate of how deep they are. This one down here I'm estimated probably only going to need to be around about 2mm deep. That's going to go in here, and then we can put lines in there and everything else just like that one. As I said, we'll open up these other ones as well. Get this one boxed up. I'll show you how I did it at the end. Okay, quick little tip for you. We've just chopped off these just for a moment, but you might be worried about obviously the spread to keep this in, because this does widen up a little bit. Okay, so what we're going to do is pop in the parts, okay, hold them together so you've got the right width going on underneath. Okay, check it's all lined up underneath like that. Okay, take this bottom part, pop it in the gap. Okay, we're just going to let that drop in. Make sure you're squared up. And all we're going to do is take a little bit of super glue. Okay, and we're just going to tap it in. If we bring you in a little bit, we're just going to tap it in a few of the little points. Just like so. And if you grab your kicker, you can just give it a quick spray. let that set off, okay, and then you can just pop a little bit more as is required. Around. Okay, tiny bit more. Then what that'll do, that will hold that just for the moment as is required. So then when you come along here, and we whip these off, too much kicker, that's that all in place as is needed now. Okay, so then that will give you your rigidity, your strength that's required. If you're happy how it's all sitting and you've got no problems with it at all, you can just run a lot more super glue down there, or your normal glue, or anything else you want to use. Okay, and then that way you can start building up all your little bits and pieces as you run along. But that way, that fixes that in there now, and it holds the spread and re-strengthens that entire area up. So it's just a quick little way of securing that in place. Okay then, so here we go. We've got laid out these little guys here. Now these are obviously for the formers that we've actually done, which are going to make the panels stick to, which they come along on here. So obviously we're just going to fit one, for instance, E goes in there just like that, and that gives us our former. How you're going to see it just like that. Now we've got all the other ones done. To be honest, it's a little bit hit and miss how they all go. I've made up these generally by just using the curve on the actual original part as a bit of a guesstimate, and the one here, but obviously it flattens down as it gets nearer the rear, so they're all slightly different. So it's always been a little bit of trial and error of popping them on, and obviously because it's going to be uncovered, we're not going to be able to tell if they're right or not, so we might have to sand them off afterwards, but that's not so much of a problem. We get in there with a big block and just make them to the correct height. What I'll do is I will actually get these photographed and measured up and everything, so you can see the diameters of actually what we're using and how we're doing it. But basically how it's going to work, we've just got it. Any trouble with these kits because they're a bit big, it's finding room for them. Okay, I've marked them obviously ABC, so I know how we're going. So we've got one that's going to pop in up here just like this. This is A, and what this is going to do is just going to cause a bulkhead that goes through to the rest of it. Now it's slightly lower, I don't know if you can see it, how well you can see it on here, but it's actually slightly lower. So this part here, the actual original part, will fit still on the top of it very nicely, no problem. So that will give us an inlay of how it's going to go. So obviously if it was being re-riveted up, it will go back in there and everything else. So we can put holes through that for obviously the pipe work running through. Now at the same time we've got all the others, to say I've marked them A, B, C, D, and they're just going to run, as we said, just down here, just like so. He says, try to do it very gently, keep it in. We've bumped it up today. But anyway, what we've got is those. So what we can actually do, we take our strips. Now I've done these 5mm wide. Okay, this is 1mm plasticard. It's very hard to tell because obviously in reality it's a thin bit of metal and then folded over on the top, so we're just trying to kill two birds with one stone by having it thick enough to look like it's on the top. You could come along with some extremely thin plasticard and do that sort of metal area at the top, or photo etch, but something like that. But for what we're going to need, it's going to be an overall effect. I'm going to be quite happy to do it this way. So obviously we've taken in some little sawtooth parts you can probably see in there, just like this, and then obviously we've got the same on the other side, so when they interlock they become flush with each other as we go along like that. So if we have a quick dress rehearsal, as I said, it's all a little bit of a case of not quite sure how it's going to sit and be and all the rest of it, but that's just the way we sort of really trying to work it for the moment. We'll just bring it across a minute. So actually what we've got, I've marked them with a back, and the back one is literally just going to disappear down the back end, okay, and the first top half will be flush. Okay, so if we just pop one in for the moment, and we just put B in here, then B will hold it all up. Okay, move you in. Okay, and then we can do the same for the other side. So we've got this one, it's just going to fit down the back. So if we just test fit how this is all going to go together. So that's that one, that's A, B. So then we can pop a C in. So it's all a little bit fiddly for the moment. Okay, and then we can put a D down the back. Then we've got E and F, and they are very tight down here. So we might have to sand that one down just a touch. And actually what it is, it's where they're a little bit too long at the back, they're actually touching up, but it will give us you an idea of how it's going to be. But there we go, that's them all in there now, just like this, and there is our primary framework of how that's going to be. I know it's very hard to see where it's just in the white. Obviously it gives us our effect just like that. So that's what we're going to have like that. What we're going to do now is obviously we're going to come along with some very fine plastic card and put it down in amongst this, because obviously this is fuel cells that run across the back, so we can put in the little bits of detail by using very, very thin shims of plastic card. I said about them before, they come in very handy. It's these little tiny thin strips. We can just strip it out there to give it that effect of where it's got obviously overlapping metals and things, and it will liven it up. To be honest, this is going to be one of those aircraft that's going to need it, because it's going to be such a focal point, this thing on the back being opened up, and it's going to be, obviously the rest of the aircraft's going to be a light colour, so it's going to be greens and piping. It's going to stand out and people's eyes are going to be drawn to it. So hopefully with that in the cockpit, it's going to look fantastic, and then you can start to look around everything else. So we want to focus on doing this right. So say little thin strips of plastic card which we're going to lay in there, and then what we'll do is with these bulkheads we're obviously going to have to put holes through, and that's why we're going to look at the reference photos, see how they all are, and then we can start putting the plumbing in and everything else, test fit it all. If we're happy how it all is and everything else like that, then we can start to tack it, glue it all into place, everything else like that, to really give us a nice detail.